What up? Purple Pill 5050. Your host Cometa Reyes, aka Manuel Jesus el Cristalero. God, I need to stop saying that. No, I'm not trying to be cool or anything with the fucking shades. It's just that the light is too bright, and essentially it does damage eyes at this level anyways. So essentially I have them like this because light bulb. I need to figure out a way to install this light bulb somewhere in the center, I guess, so I could essentially stop trying to protect myself at every moment. Because essentially I've noticed that from one side I can see way better than the other side, which means I'm going blind from the side that the light hits me in more directly. So essentially, who knew, right? But makes sense. So do y'all remember the question earlier in the other video? Yes, no, maybe, so. If you don't even remember me asking a question, it's because you didn't watch my last video. Thanks for the support. I'm just joshing you. But essentially, yeah, my last video, I asked a question, and here goes the question. What does a hypnotist, a Rubik's Cube, and life itself have in common? There's one answer that fits all three criteria. There's actually a couple of answers, but I'm looking for one specifically. But don't let that stop you from pausing this video, thinking about it, and essentially writing it down in the comment section, because essentially I love to see what people think before they react, you know, before you learn this new concept, or maybe it's rather old concept, but it's got a new twist to it, if you catch my drift. So essentially, you know, go along with it. Comment on the section, comment down below or wherever the comment section is at, what you think this is about, what you think the answer is, and I'll give you. Done? Okay. If you're not done, or if you haven't, you know, fully, then just pause the video. That's what it's there for, you know, YouTube. Otherwise I'd be live streaming, right? So essentially, moving on. Tesla said it when he mentioned vortex. You know, the vortex thing is essentially is very captivating, and it's very confusing, but not at all, because essentially it makes perfect sense. It's kind of like a printer. If y'all ever had an experience like, you know, up front, face to face with a printer, you see that it doesn't really print out like Picasso, just like boom, 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 boom. No, it prints out line by line. So it's right. Essentially, here are the two concepts that I drew, so you guys can see an illustration of what I mean. So, reason I'm using the mirror is because I'm way too lazy to like flip the camera around, and then like I do have it charging. So yeah, this basically is the concept of what I'm illustrating. This is why a hypnotist, a Rubik's Cube, and life itself have something in common, right? Consciousness. Okay. Consciousness means to be aware of, right? but what are we aware of? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Are you aware of every step you take? Have you ever stepped in dog shit? I bet you weren't really conscious of your footsteps then, were you? It's basically illustrating how unconscious we really are. Because notice this. We only see through our two eyes. How can we not see through our feet, our hands? If you guys still haven't been able to do so, that means you're lacking. There's 50-50. 50 of y'all actually can see through your hands, can actually see through your body's individual cells. And that's fucking consciousness. That's Christ consciousness right there. Essentially, that's where our evolution is heading. But again, we can't have evolution without revolution, right? So we gotta renew our ideas and concepts because they have not been working. How is it that we've lived this much and haven't evolved anymore? Essentially, yeah, we've evolved like technology wise, but like our bodies are lacking now. Our bodies are essentially replacing our evolutionary traits with technology. And you guessed it, that is bad. I mean, if God is good and everything came from God, then what is bad? But essentially, we are not using our fullest potential. Okay? This right here, this illustrates and it indicates how little we actually know about our own selves. Right? How many moles do I have in my back? I don't know. Well, shit, man. I gotta check one day, right? To plainly put it this way, essentially, the hypnotist is using an algorithm to get you to tick. That's how he's able to hypnotize people. Because he's using an algorithm and he's using the vortex to basically hit you in that sweet spot where he can play with your mind a bit while your actual consciousness drifts off. This is the weird contradiction, because essentially he's hitting this part right here. The part that you're actually conscious of, he's hitting it. But when he does, he bumps you out of consciousness. So essentially, you are you, but your conscious being is on one of these black tabs, right? So you're kind of crooked. Hypnotism is a crooked business anyways. So that's essentially how I do it, right? He couldn't have figured out how to hypnotize you unless he was able to kind of derail your consciousness, if you get my drift. Better yet, let's go to the Rubik's Cube, right? Because when you're doing a Rubik's Cube, you can't just do one side. You finish one side and then you look around and the rest is all jambles. Kind of like life. The more attention you put to one thing, essentially, the more the rest becomes chaos. Okay, so essentially everything is all about balance. It's all about the algorithm that you have to unlock to be able to A, solve the Rubik's Cube, B, be able to prevent hypnotism on yourself, and C, essentially life itself, because life itself is an algorithm. You notice this. I mean, there's 4 seasons. There's, year after year, there's 12 months, 30 to 31 days, the miscellaneous, February. So essentially, if you haven't noticed by now that life's all about algorithms, it's all about cycles, and it's all about, what happens here will eventually happen again later on, then you're a lost cause. Bye. Humanity will evolve with or without your help. And essentially, those who are interested in maintaining the species alive, not only alive, but supercharged, those are the people I need here watching and listening, because essentially 50 will, 50 won't. 50% of the people that indeed need to watch this will either already know this, or they'll be like, wow, it makes sense, So essentially, that's concept number 1, as far as the drawing. Concept number 2, I have to turn off the light for a sec. Alright, so let's see if I could get it. Where is it at? Let me see if I could. Where did I leave my pen? Oh, here it is. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so right there. You see that? Let's see if I can. Yep, there we go. It's kind of like a Goku, like a Dragon Ball Z character, but essentially, it's just the same, stick figure guy with the spiral going around him, and essentially, what I want to illustrate with that one is kind of like this, right? So this is the first concept, right? We're only aware of this concept, this consciousness right here. But essentially, here's what you're missing out on. Your spiral is revolving constantly. Your consciousness does not start here, regardless of what you think. What you see is not exactly what you're supposed to be experiencing in a way. Feel me? It revolves from top to bottom, bottom to top. It doesn't matter where it starts off, because essentially it'll bounce back and it'll revolve and it'll go forward or go backwards. It'll do whatever it's most comfortable with. It'll flow. So essentially, the saying, go with the flow, kind of what that implies. So essentially, our consciousness, our aura, our spirit flows throughout our whole body. Yet we're only conscious of the parts that touch these eyes. Why? Do you feel me? Essentially, it's like a printer. As I said, a printer prints line by line. So it prints line by line, And essentially it's kind of like that, where you have the spiral going around you, around your body, and it only catches glimpses of what connects with your vision and your peripheral vision. Some of you have experienced this, where your peripheral vision have actually expanded. That's good. That means you're on the right track. But essentially, don't just be like, oh yes, I finally did it, and then like later on you still be like nearsighted, you know. Essentially, you want to keep expanding this vision. You want to be able to see behind your head. Okay, that's actual 3D. For those of y'all that think that we're in the third dimension, sorry to say, but according to this type of consciousness that we're experiencing, number 2, we're still in the second dimension. And honestly, my calculations have shot me off to the reality that we're in a higher dimension than the third. But we are, and at the same time we're not, because essentially if we can only see this much, essentially we're in the second dimension. Wow, what an experience to be seeing the second dimension in such a way. It makes sense, because essentially you're not seeing everything entirely. You're not seeing behind people. That's third dimension. From what it seems like, you can actually see from a higher dimension, but you're actually experiencing a lower dimension. So essentially this is 2D. Who knew? Fuck logic, everybody.